Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another episode with me, your host, Imperial Dane. Today's topic is going to be some of the cards being released in Brigade of the Sky, the next Shadowverse expansion, which will be hitting, well, tomorrow. At least sort of during the night here, anyways, where I'm living, Denmark. I'm going to be looking at the Swordcraft cards because, well, I think it's going to be easiest to focus on one class. In particular, one class I play a lot and I find personally very interesting. I can that way just, delve deeper into the card rather than have to, go quickly through the entire class set. Plus, I can't, for example, talk a lot about, say, dragons, since I don't particularly play a lot of dragons, so I feel like I just, want to pour out my expertise in Swordcraft. So, starting out here, we got Latham, Honourable Knight, a new version of a gold card, and was actually there back in standard for Swordcraft, though not quite as impressive back then. He has been upgraded to a full legendary with quite some effects here. First off, Accelerate, which is a new keyword allowing you to play him as a spell. For those, that cost, if you can't pay the full cost, in this case you summon 2 knights, meaning he's basically an Oathless knight. Already that's kind of big because for Swordcraft, which, if you want to try to play a token strategy, you want to use his actually tends to be, you actually lack some consistency because you don't have a lot of cheap token generators. Now, Latham can sort of help with that. Plus, it's also another way to ensure you don't break, because there's certainly always been a lot of times where, say, had like King Arthur or a bunch of Alfreds, quite early in the game and none of the other cards. If you got Latham early in the game, you can still, play something on turn 2 or turn 3. So in this regard, he's a very big help. And that's just, the Accelerate cost, the fanfare there, which you get on 8 is actually, I think, the bigger deal here. Where you basically sort of get the effect of whenever someone attacks and you have no other knights in play that is the 1/1 knight, you get 1. Great. again, basically means everything becomes +1/+1 in a sense, but in the form of a token. Which means if you're playing a token strategy already, you're basically making the board wider. That's kind of neat. But what he also then does is any, one play point thing being played, meaning 1-drops, but also a lot of the tokens for Sword. Right now, most of Sword's tokens, and the one that are consistently being generated, are 1 cost. Like, you got Knight, you got Heavy Knight, and you got Shield Guardian. Those 3 will basically also be affected by this. There's like Steelclad Knight, but that's pretty much only Floral Fencer. And there was this Courageous Knight back in standard, but he's gone. And then theoretically, stuff like, the Council of Card Knights. But otherwise, when anything then attacks, and again, from that again, you then basically get a Storm Knight, essentially a Quick Blade, if you will. Plus any other knight you generate, like any token you generate, gets Storm as well. So basically anything that generates like these tokens suddenly becomes, a lot more effective. Confront Adversity, normally just, 4 PP, deal 1 damage to all enemy followers. You get a knight, you get a shield guard, and all of a sudden now you get 2 quick bladers, and one of those quick bladers has ward. Anything that generates tokens becomes a lot nastier. Celia, who just, normally, if you play as, for the tokens, suddenly again generates 3 if you got no other knights on the board, and again, they all have tokens. Anything basically becomes wider. Council of Card Knights suddenly becomes, summon 4 if you don't have a knight in play, and then you get 2 storm attack. Like anything that just generates a wide board and also has any attack, that becomes a bit better with Latham. Storm followers just get a +1/+1 essentially. So Celia, again, when you play it for the storm effect, there suddenly becomes just 1 attack higher. Quick Blade, in theory, you could play becomes 2 attack. Like he transforms a lot of things within Swordcraft, and I really can't just understate how powerful it is. Of course, it's not going to work into all decks. The usual sort of type of deck, and this is probably a lot of people I think just misevaluate him, like, King Arthur into Sky Fortress. Those types of decks don't want to play him. These are not decks that try to play wide. They do it with King Arthur, but that's just once. That's just really, they're just, hey, I'm generating some big threats, you have to deal with them, otherwise I'm going to Sky Fortress you, and it's going to be sad for you. Those types of decks, they don't want Latham. Latham is sort of more wide, consistent wide support. In particular because those types of decks usually at some point ran into the issue. If you got your board cleared, you could not get it started again. Like, you could play down some more stuff, but you'd get nowhere. Latham fixes that because, again, all of those tokens, again, have storms, and I can just keep pushing and just get the job finished. You can keep generating boards because, again, he makes those boards wider for, again, that nature part of his effect as well. So he's really powerful for token decks, and he's just really massive token sword support, in my, opinion. That's really where he helps in. Again, he also makes just any 1-drop better. So, like, Latham is just an incredible card in so many ways. I'm just really excited about him. I'm going to craft 3 of him, and I'm going to, like, animate 3 of them. Like, just, as far as I'm concerned, he's just one of the most exciting legendaries they've ever printed for Swordcraft. I could keep on talking about it, but I think I've sort of just said the main points. Again, he's not for all decks, again, certain mid-range type decks, again, just like more the typical ones, don't want him because he doesn't fit with their strategy. But again, if you wanted to play like sort of a wider style, you know, again, more token support, maybe in Banner Sword, I mean, he's great. But he's not, you know, King Arthur into, you know, Sky Fortress great. Again, those types of decks don't want to play him, though. Again, he can shine where they do not. For example, there's like, you know, a lot of now AoEs like the big scale, like, you know, Temis Purge. In those situations, I mean, King Arthur into, you know, Sky Fortress could just be, you know, removed, and then you got no real way of getting back into this. Here, you don't particularly care because you can keep just throwing stuff at the enemy's face. So again, he's got a lot of utility in a lot of situations, plus his stat line is pretty strong as well, 8-7, meaning if they can't remove him, he's gonna hurt. So, I mean, really exciting card personally. But we're not just here to talk about Latham. Again, I could just make an entire video talking about Latham. Now, we also got here Zeta Crimson Lancer, the other Swordcraft legendary. Much more simple in design. It's got rush, it's got an aggressive stat line, 6-5. It's also very importantly an officer. And generates a Beatrix, who's basically a 4-2 with Storm, and can then at 10 play points basically gain the ability to ignore wards and then give you 6 play points back. Also an officer, by the way. And I mean, that's a pretty strong effect. I mean, basically gives you just, you know, something to help finish off the fight with. Of course, you have to note you can't keep doing this. Like, you can't build up a lot of Beatrixes in turn. You have to expend the Beatrix before that. But I mean, a lot of utility can help, say, you know, for finishes. I mean, clear up obstacles. It's very good in aggro decks, mid-range decks. Theoretically, maybe even control decks want to run it because, like, 6-5 can clear out a lot of things in the board. Meaning, you can use Zeta to actually, you know, preserve evolution points. Plus, Beatrix could even be used as a removal. I mean, 4 play point, 4 damage is perhaps not the most amazing removal, but it's still a removal. So, I mean, Zeta is certainly also very flexible. Though mechanically, again, nowhere near, as I say, as fancy or exciting as Latham, but she does the work. Plus, as an officer and Beatrix as well, theoretically, if Banner Sword comes back, again, might then involve Latham, or might not involve that, but still, actually benefits from the Banner Sword, which is actually kind of impressive because they've been, for the most part, been very consistent in showing, you know, no Storm followers have officer tags. They've all been commanders. So starting to see, you know, an officer that has Storm is actually pretty interesting there. Could possibly see the return of Banner Sword. Maybe again, though, more probably as some sort of mid-range style deck. So again, very potent, and I'd certainly expect to see this one crop up in a lot of decks. I mean, aggro can use it to help clear out wards, and again, you know, set up for the finisher. Plus, if they can't remove, if Zeta doesn't die on trade, you know, again, she's a threat in herself that has to be removed, because otherwise, if they get to hit face alongside Beatrix, that's 10 damage. Like, theoretically, that could be a 10 damage on turn 7. That's kind of nuts, but again, just highlights how powerful theoretically it could be. Again, theoretically, it's most likely not going to happen in most situations, but in those situations it does, it's going to hurt. So, I mean, again, very potent legendary there again. Mechanically, compared to Latham, not quite as interesting, but still powerful. Definitely powerful. We'll actually see much more usage, I think, in more decks compared to Latham. But again, personally, I'm more excited about Latham. Moving on, we got here Dragon Knight, which is essentially the Swiss Army knife of Swordcraft. Since it's basically a choose 1 of 4, which is actually 2 more than most choose cards so far has had, also has enhanced choose 2 of them instead. The big question here being, and it probably is, you can't, but basically if you can choose 2 of the same at the same time, because then theoretically you just, you know, play 2 Lancelots and, you know, hit for 6 because he's got Storm. But already got 4 choices here. You got Vayne, who's an officer, and he's pretty good for trading. Like, you know, he restores 3 defense at the end of the turn, so he's pretty good, you know, say on turn 5 itself. Plus he gains a bit of attack, so if he's not immediately removed, he can keep growing and he can keep healing himself. So he's sort of very good for sort of trading purposes. Siegfried, another officer, is just a Bane and a Warp, but that also is reasonably good for trading purposes. They're for different types, plus, you know, setting out a threat they can't, you know, just easily trade into. He can sort of clear out very large targets, or targets that have some sort of specific thing, but, you know, can still die to Bane. So, I mean, in this regard, he's also pretty handy. Plus, I mean, he's a ward, so they can't attack from compared to Vayne. So, I mean, in some ways, Vayne is, you know, probably better versus mid-range decks, but Siegfried can be useful versus some aggro decks since they, you know, have to specifically remove him. We'll see. Then you got Lancelot, who's commander, but then he has Storm. Again, you know, compared with Beatrix, again, there's very much specifically ensured he's a commander, so you can't, you know, say sneak him into Banner Sword. I mean, I really get the feeling that they're very, very careful when it comes to designing Swordcraft cards about making Banner Sword too good or even bringing it back. Like, but yeah. And he gains +1/+1 if you got an allied, you know, Vayne in play. So again, this has me suspecting you can't play 2 of them on, say, turn 8, because otherwise you're just going to play 2 Lancelots and just hit them for 6. But even then, getting for 4 in there is actually not too bad. And probably just for Lancelot, so you can see this card actually going into aggro. Plus, I mean, the other cards like Vayne or Siegfried could be useful in mirror matches. Like if you're going second, usually aggro tends to struggle here, but these can be useful in sort of jealousy control purposes. And then we finally get Percival, who's a 5/4 similar to Siegfried, and then has a bonus with if Siegfried is in play, he gains Rush. Alrighty. But then more specifically, sort of has an effect that basically for every follower in play, this allied follower play, he gains attack for it, so he can basically become a 9/4 if you got to say, oh, well, it's full board there. So, which is quite interesting. I mean, you can't use it to directly attack face. It doesn't have Storm, but like the potential is maybe down there the road, and if they were print, say, court that says, give a command to Storm, like, boom, instant, like, fun stuff. But also you can get him to somehow stick around. He's a really big threat. I mean, he sort of reminds me of Percival, the standard card, who sort of dealt the damage directly to the enemy leader for how many officers you had on board, which wasn't quite that good. But this is, in some ways, less constrained because it's just allied followers in general. I mean, this one would probably be more used on turn 8, since again, Rush, and then say, either 6, 7, 8, 9 damage, it's pretty good. And again, if you get him to stick behind Siegfried, I mean, you're gonna hurt a lot. I mean, again, he can keep doing this. He can keep stacking, so he like hit for 9 on turn 8, and then they can't remove him. You could like hit for, I don't know, 13 damage on turn 9. Again, highly unlikely in most situations, but it's there. Again, it sort of highlights just the range Percival potentially has in that regard. He's certainly interesting from my perspective, since again, he's sort of token support, but again, he's not like going to see a lot of use, get that hit in the end, but still he can work with it, so that's interesting. I always like stuff that's interesting in those sort of mechanical senses. Then we get Day Secret Agent, 1/1 for 4. Not very impressive, though again, Vagabond Frog was a 1/2 with constant ambush. This one just got 1 ambush. The trick, though, is, of course, you get choose with her. So you get either Evan Novice Agent, who's a 0 PP 2/2, making her essentially, we choose this one, a, 3/3 with ambush. But the key here is, though, she has an evolve that basically allows her to gain Storm, but also deal 2 damage to any follower. So she's clearly designed here to being used, I think, more or less exclusive on turn 4. It's less great on turn 5, turn 6 compared to some of the other tempo evolves. This sort of here in Brigade or the Scamp can usually quickly clear out a target and then hit face. Can, for example, be used in the aggro mirror matchup, where again, usually going second as aggro is less good, but here can sort of quickly clear a target and then still hit face with it. Plus, you then get a 1/1 that can be theoretically evolved for 3 to hit next turn. And then you also get the other one, which is Infiltration, which draws you a number of cards if you have the same number of cards as your opponent does. I mean, it's basically Divine Fervor, the Shadowverse version, though of course you can't play it and say early on, you have to play it later on, but still versus certain decks it can be very powerful. You can say draw 3 or 4 cards from it. It's basically powerful, as you can then just fill up your hand and keep attacking. So this one could certainly be powerful, and overall Day he is clearly, I feel, made with aggro decks, maybe in banner sorts, and again, these are officers. Again, this becomes a 3/4 then, and that's a 2/1. Which again becomes a 4/3, so I mean there's potential here with Banner Sword. Again, I keep sort of getting the impression that they're trying to resurrect Banner Sword, maybe finding giving Swordcraft something else besides mid-range and aggro. And obviously Banner to an extent is sort of aggro, but if they sort of try to push it sort of into more tempo style, that could be interesting as well. So, I mean, I definitely expect to see there wasn't in some aggro decks, maybe, Banner Sword, maybe. Overall, again, reasonably interesting, and again, has some potential in a lot of ways. But overall, a bit tricky to say in some ways. It's not quite as impactful as some of the other gold cards, some of the other classes are getting, but I'd still say is pretty good, and again, has a lot of potential. And it's usually that potential can be sort of fully difficult, sort of fully evaluate, like how good does it actually make it. But I definitely think it has some room there for being good. Moving on, we got Charlotta, Tiny Justice, Ward 2/3 Commander. And then Evolve, you basically make all your followers immune to spells and effect damage for, until the opponent next turn you get there. So, I mean, that's a pretty good card again for wide style sword. I mean, again, for the usual typical mid-range sword, probably not so much. Aggro sword, maybe, again, sort of help protect yourself as AoE can be useful. Some might see some usage there. Plus, I mean, a 2/3 ward can help just shield your board from, say, other aggro decks. It can be useful in mirror matches as well to sort of slow them down. So maybe there, but definitely sort of decks that want to go wide, I think would certainly like Charlotta, because, again, you're usually very vulnerable to AoEs, and Charlotta very much helps with that. So, a pretty, I think, good sort of wide style support card, and again, sort of, very nicely for sort of the type of style of Swordcraft I play. I mean, looks certainly interesting as well. And without evolution points, it's still a 2/3 ward, which definitely has its usage as well. So, I mean, a very nice card, though not quite made for every deck. Moving on, we get age-worn weaponry. And here's a fun fact. We actually had the art for this card like before Dawnbreak Night Edge was released. In fact, it's made by the same guy who was very much made notorious for, well, basically napping card art or plagiarizing Magic the Gathering there with his other bit there for Valz, another Swordcraft card there with his bullets there. You know, there was sort of some art there, and it turns out he'd been nabbing from, I think it was one of the Ravnica sets of Magic the Gathering. Some I can't remember what the organization was called, but basically one of those cards he's nabbed the art from, and then people basically after that began going through all his portfolio, and they found the art for this card. Basically, at that stage, I pretty much sort of roughly had to figure out what the card was actually supposed to do. You know, do something, summon a card, maybe give a buff out here. I hadn't quite figured it'd be choose amulet, but I'd sort of figured it'd be something with summoning tokens, and that's basically what it does. I mean, in that regard, it's also an impressive sort of I would say thing there on the art director's choice, and so I imagine that's how it works. I mean, usually these kind of games you have some guy who decides this is what the card's supposed to look like, and then they have to work out either to internal artists or in many cases freelance artists. In this case, a freelance artist, I think from Taiwan or maybe Hong Kong, I can't quite remember. And of course, usually this also hints at another element, which is the fact they usually make the expansions a lot ahead of time. In fact, it's usually they begin like a half a year ahead. So I mean, this stuff is already ready there at that stage. Fun fact. So I mean, by the time for example, Brigade of the Sky is out, they're all working on the expansions going to head out in like half a year. Fun fact. So yeah, bit of a game design talk there, but overall the card itself interesting. I mean, based on its own, because you have to have the Swordcraft follow and play. I mean, you can actually do something with neutral follows there as well. But basically, if you have a Swordcraft follow and play, you can sort of play it as something else. Otherwise, you basically get two in Storm, but you just get 1/1 with Storm at a time. For all intents and purposes, and you summon at your opponent's end of your opponent's turn. You might as well say it has Storm, and it's basically a 1/1. So in that regard, it's kind of like Princess Juliet, but again just split up over 2 turns, which has some usage. I mean, it's not the optimal solution, but it does has some potential there. If you got nothing else to play, for example, it's better than nothing. I mean, the key here, for example, is not Great Shield. That is sort of the other sort of less amazing option. I mean, basically gives your follow more defense. I mean, you can actually do some value trades for this card. Plus, you get a 1/1 with Ward, the Shield Guardian. That can also be useful in certain situations. I mean, if you're going second as aggro, again, you usually struggle there. Allowing yourself to maybe sort of value trade the aggro deck plus generate a Ward, slowing them down, could be useful. It might also be useless. It could maybe something more control deck might want to do. I don't know. It's obviously not the first choice of this card, but again, who knows? Maybe down the road there'll be a deck that sort of makes use of the Great Shield more than the Great Sword, which is basically in terms of just raw stats. You get +1, plus you get a Heavy Knight. Is basically Palin's Fencer. That was a very much a core card in the old style aggro decks. And you might wonder, well, why do they do this like this instead of just reprinting Palin's Fencer? Well, the thing about Palin's Fencer was if you played a Quick Blade out, it would snowball very hard, because then your Quick Blade attacks on turn 1, that's 1 damage, then you buff it, then you get 3 damage, plus you got the 2/1 on top of the other 2/1, and then next turn you have them down to 7 health. I mean, 3 turns, you got them down to 13. In fact, if you then played out a Storm, say Princess Juliet or whatever again, you could have them down to 11 health. That is, in 3 turns, you could push them down to almost half health. I mean, that is some severe snowballing potential, and I think that's what they want to avoid here with Swordcraft. So, basically, they give Swordcraft a buff and one actually with the, shall we note, less restrictions on it. And usually, I mean, Palin's Fencer had some heavy restrictions. You could only buff officers, not commanders. Here, it can be an officer or commander, so you could, for example, do it with Perseus as well. But the way they do it, they ensure that Swordcraft doesn't snowball right away super hard. So, I mean, you basically still get the stats, but like if you pull a Quick Blade, it's not going to be like, again, turn 3, your opponent's down to half health. I mean, with this, turn 3, your opponent's actually still going to be hurting, but it'll probably be closer to like 13 health, which is still heavy, but it's not 11. I mean, again, those things can make a big difference. So, I mean, it's an interesting card. I definitely see aggro running it. Maybe some other decks could consider running it. Maybe. I'm not entirely sure there. Maybe ban assaults, and it does generate tokens. Who knows? Who knows? It's a bit more difficult to say here, but I can definitely see aggro running it, because again, it's a buff and it gives you stuff to play as well. And again, it has some utility, so who knows? But it's definitely a fun card. It's an interesting card. I do feel like it's a Swordcraft card. That's also important. Moving on, we get Sellsword Lucius, a 1-drop. Enhance 5, destroy an enemy follower. I mean, he's basically a reverse onslaught, which is, you know, a standard card where if you destroy the follower and then had a commander in play, you got a 1/1 knight. He just don't need the commander at all. So there's a bit of an interesting sort of set there. Plus, he can just be played as a 1-drop. I mean, overall, he sort of just can be a great tempo play. If you're also pushing ahead, just remove something. You know, they evolved something big, you just destroyed. No problems, move ahead. This can be a great way, and again, the fact, you know, it doesn't require an evolution point can make it quite useful in a lot of situations. Plus, he works with Latham. Right? I mean, it becomes essentially a dance of death with 2 bodies, because again, like, you don't have a knight to play, he attacks, of course he gets Storm, you get another, you know, 1/1 with Storms. I mean, he can be pretty good there as well in Latham decks, actually, and that's sort of way of making him being utilised a lot. And so again, maybe Banner Sword, if it decides to use Latham, could even be used in some aggro decks, since again, just being able to remove a big ward is really useful for Swordcraft at times. In particular, more aggressive decks really want this out of the way fast, so he's definitely feel a card that has some utility there. And again, really has some utility with Latham decks. So I'm definitely going to be trying him out myself. Plus, I mean, he's a silver, so he's pretty cheap. And again, he's got officers, so he could work with Banner Sword. Princess Tina, a 4/4/3/3, summons a 1-point Swordcraft follower from a deck at the end of the turn. Not very impressive, but he can essentially give you a 4/4 in terms of stats total, you know, 4/5. Kind of decent, but the way it works, it's kind of slow. I mean, it does work with Mars. The question is, what sort of deck wants to run that? And that's the question. I can't entirely see what sort of deck wants to run this entirely. It's a bit tricky to sort of say what sort of deck wants to run Princess Tina as such. I mean, it's not a Latham deck because the way she works is just too slow, and you kind of want to use the 1-drops. You have some for more synergies there with Latham when played directly. Mid-range decks don't want to run a lot of 1-drops, but theoretically, if they want to run a 1-drop, but at the same time don't want to run them too much, they could theoretically run her aggro decks, I feel. Maybe not. Maybe they could run her. Maybe. But it's harder to say. Definitely not Banner Sword, since she's a commander, and they want to run as few commanders as humanly possible. So I'm not entirely sure where this one actually fits in. I mean, it's sort of maybe a filler card, but at least it's an interesting one, because a lot of the ones Swordcraft usually gets just enhance, gain a load of stats, be boring. This at least is interesting, but I'm not convinced it's very good. But it could be useful somewhere. Tanya, Shadow Enforcer 3/1, Ambush Bane, very much aggro, maybe Banner. But again, very aggressively statted, can be used to attack face for 3 damage, which is good. And otherwise, if like they throw down a ward, she can be used in clearing those out. And again, Banner, she becomes a 4/1. So I mean, got some utility there, got some utility. How much utility cause is going to be another thing, but there's definitely some utility there with Tanya, Shadow Enforcer. Again, she's very much an aggro-oriented card. Plus a bronze, so pretty cheap to include. Then we got Tycoon, another sort of interesting card, which is just a 2/2 commander initially, so not very impressive. The key though is in fanfare. It's gain stats, again the sort of thing that's same boring, but then there's the other part. You draw cards and then you have 5 cards in your hand. And usually these cards can be treated as judged. I mean, sort of compared with other card draw Swordcraft cards. I mean, looks see some use. I mean, at 4 play point, you get a 1/2 draw 2 cards, but the way it draws is more specific cards. This is more general cards. And then we sort of see like Avant Blade or something really usage in, you know, Darkness Evolved drop off shortly after that. We got Spartacus, a legendary, who also draws you 2 cards, but doesn't see much usage because of that either. So I think if he has to see usage, he's going to have to draw you at least 3 or 4 cards, maybe even 5 if possible. And that means you got to be playing an aggressive mid-range deck, sort of tempo style deck. Usually a deck that wants to play a lot of threats very fast, maybe sort of a, I don't know, token style deck or banner style deck, maybe. I mean, Banner did run Avant Blade to just refill. I mean, basically sort of a deck that can run the distance, not just an aggro deck, but at the same time plays out a lot of stuff and then wants you to refill it. So like, if you can ensure your deck consistently can draw like 3 cards or more from him on turn 7 or later, he's pretty good. If you can only draw 2 or less decks from him from turn 7, he's not good. I mean, this is not a card control decks want to run, or even like the slower style of mid-range decks. But no, this is more faster style decks. And again, decks that want to consistently flood the board and generate threats. They want to run Tycoon. Again, not aggro deck because they want to do it faster than Tycoon can sort of use for before. But again, sort of more aggressive mid-range decks, they probably want to try and run him because, again, he can just refill the hand. They can just keep throwing down threats. I mean, if you get to draw 5 cards off him, that's insane. Like, you could theoretically draw into another Tycoon. You can just then go nuts at just flooding the board consistently. And again, you got Latham going. And again, this could be fun. You can just keep maybe throwing Storm at your opponent. Because similar like Again, this also tends to the other issue of Sword running, so it just runs out of cards into the Steam. Tycoon can help with that with certain decks, so he might have some usage there. I'm not fully convinced, but I'm definitely going to maybe try him out there just to see if he can sort of help with some of those issues there. It could be useful. And again, players really hate it when Swordcraft suddenly begins to run a lot of cards. I mean, he could be useful there. He could be useful. I mean, a 5/5 draw, 3 to 5 cards is pretty good. So he has potential, but I'm not going to proclaim him, a sure fit either yet. Then we find we're on to Grand Auction. This is a bit of a weird card. It's a 1 play point spell. You discard a card from your hand. Note, not random. You specifically choose one. You draw a card then. Alright, so an insight, but also discard insight. And then you put an H-Ward weaponry into your hand. And that's the question becomes, what side of deck wants to run this? I mean, obviously it wants to be an aggressive deck since it wants to use H-Ward weaponry. Possible. Or they just want to discard stuff from their hand, like get rid of a card they don't want to run and just want to cycle through faster. And I don't think there's a lot of decks that want to do that now. Maybe Banner Sword, because in case you draw too many banners, in which case you can use Grand Auction to get rid of it, maybe. But I think where this card could potentially be really good if they ever actually create a discard archetype for Sword, in which case being able to specifically choose the card you want to discard is going to be powerful. Plus you draw a card, so I mean really, if they ever then print a card for Swordcraft that wants to be discarded, like it does something with discarded, this card is going to be nuts with it. Beyond that, I don't think it's going to be particularly impressive. Some decks might want to run it, so they can put something else instead of H-Ward and weaponry, but still can be sure to have it, and again rid of some card they don't want to specifically play there. Maybe. I mean, it's a weird card, but again, if discard Sword ever becomes a thing, Grand Auction will be a thing. And that's the question. I mean, they sort of occasionally just put in these sort of hints of weird archetypes into different classes and they never do anything with them. So, I mean, this could easily just be a card that never sees any usage. It could maybe, though. I mean, I can't completely rule it out. But again, if discard Sword ever becomes a thing, this becomes a thing. I am 99% sure of it. Because, again, a 1 play point, discard something and draw a card is useful in decks that want to discard something. Plus, you get this. Again, you're not really losing a lot in hand size either. So, I mean, yeah, potentially really good in discard decks if they have become a thing for Sword. If. And again, that's a pretty big if. But if, then it's something. So, there you have it. That's sort of the Sword decks. There's definitely a lot of support from, again, potential support at least for Token Sword, but also Banner Sword. Who knows, it might just become one deck, just sort of a mid-range style Banner deck. But there's also aggro support. So they clearly, I think, not pushing mid-range, the sort of style we know from Darkness Evolved, or not Darkness Evolved, but the other one there. Dawnbreak Night Edge, yeah, that one. Name's sort of slightly going a bit wonky there in my head, but basically that style of mid-range Sword, I don't think they're trying to support so much. They're trying to push other archetypes of Sword, which is really needed because increasingly old Swordcraft's hat is mid-range Sword. So any support that could potentially be aggro or Banner or Token Sword is very appreciated. I mean, particularly since Token Sword is something the reason I began playing Shadowverse and Swordcraft 4 specifically, and it's technically part of it in its makeup. There's sort of the core identities, and Swordcraft has a lot of token generated cards there, but also cards that take advantage of it. So to see them finally begin to support that after I mean, practically you've just giving it essentially token support, just poorly doing a job there. It's nice. I mean, we still probably need a card to do something more with larger boards instead of other ways, just smaller things. But this is a huge start, and it's certainly interesting, and that's also important. It's interesting and it's fun, and overall, there's less cards to just describe as utter filler, which is also important because a lot of the previous Swordcraft cards, even Dawnbreak Night Edge, had just a lot of these dumb filler cards that clearly weren't meant to do anything. At least these cards could potentially lead to something, and if not, they're still at least kind of fun to play with, which is still fun as well. And again, that's important. It's fun. So, I mean, overall, I'd rate this overall sort of Swordcraft set as, pretty promising, pretty good. Again, not a lot of support for the mid-range Sword we know of, but rather support for other styles of Swordcraft, which have been, I think, weakly supported. Again, for me, personally exciting token support. Banner Sword, I would also say, is very likely to maybe return. And Aggro Sword certainly also looks like it'd be sort of making a return, having been pretty weak in the previous expansion. So there you go. Hope you enjoyed this video. Hope you agreed with it. Hopefully gave some thoughts to your own decks you want to build or sort of maybe prepare for. If you did, subscribe, like, share, comment. This is Imperial Lane signing off, and I'll probably be back soon enough with some videos highlighting some of these new decks. I know I will be making some decks with Latham for sure myself. So look forward to that. This is Imperial Lane signing off, and you're all a wonderful audience. Cheers.